Well, 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 said the detective. Seems you lot have managed to cock up quite a bit in such a short amount of time. He was a tall man with dark hair, a wide frame, and a black goatee. He wore a three-piece pinstripe suit fitting of the period of Bedside Manor, complete with a lilac bow tie and a matching pocket square. He stood in front of the fireplace as he spoke, one hand on his lap, the other one clutching a pocket watch, which he briefly inspected before continuing. Shall we try this again? The last of us formed a semicircle around him. Tobias and Lauren refused to sit. Nathaniel smiled from his regular spot in the armchair. I sat on the love seat. Jerry was relaxing on the arm of said love seat. I really didn't get a good look at where the others were, but the detective had us all together as his captive audience. I mean, quite literally, we were captives here. This group meeting was hardly a voluntary event. No, we fought it tooth and nail, every step of the way. When we first saw the detective, we saw his clothing and realized that he wasn't a real detective. Then it clicked that this man was just a further extension of the game. We collectively lost our tenuous exposure. Jerry threw a chair, and the detective knocked out both of his front teeth. Lauren tried to stab him, and she had a busted lip and a swollen eye to show for it. Tobias fired the last bullet remaining in his gun, but the detective still broke both of his trigger fingers. I'm not going to even pretend like I tried anything valiant. The moment I saw him take a bullet without reacting, I decided not to waste the energy. The detective pocketed his watch, smiled sinisterly, and said, "As you have no doubt gathered, the mystery of Bedside Manor spans farther than any of you have anticipated, but I'd like to simplify things. Here is what I propose. Solve the mystery, and you'll be free to go." Lauren scoffed. "Here's a counter-proposal. How about you go fuck yourself?" Jerry spat another mouthful of blood onto the puddle on the floor and said, "Actually, fucking is a lot of fun. This guy doesn't deserve it. Counter-proposal. How about you go shit yourself?" Unlike his smile, Jerry's perennial good spirits were still intact, even though his pronunciation made it sound like, this guy doesn't deserve it. But we knew what he meant. I held up my hand and said, I second that proposal." Lauren chimed in, "Thirded." "It's official, sir. Go shit yourself." A gunshot wound did nothing to hurt the man, but he wasn't completely invulnerable. He couldn't hide it behind a fake smile. We all knew that he was furious. I feel confident that this group will find its motivation in time. But until then, allow me to offer a few hints. There's no reason to venture outside of the compound. Every action has consequences. If you miss a clue, you will have a chance to... tuck this it, Jerry explained, jumping to his feet and charging into the parlor. "I wasn't finished," the detective yelled after him. Jerry returned almost immediately, a bottle in one hand and a glass in the other. Given the circumstances, I don't think any of us would blame him for getting his drink on, if it was truly a counterproductive measure to take. Jerry spat out another mouthful of blood, took a pull directly from the bottle, winced in pain. The detective snickered and continued. "As I was saying, you need to hear every clue in order to..." "Higher than 80, Jerry howled, filling the cup up to its brim. The detective snarled, "If you don't stop interrupting me, I'll have to put you in a timeout." Tobias turned and gave Jerry a wink. I didn't know what was about to happen, but I braced myself. "What, pray tell, does higher than 80 even mean?" the detective asked Jerry. Jerry walked up to him and splashed the contents of the drink on his face. He then spat blood again and said, "Higher than 80 proof is flammable." As he spoke, Tobias dove for the fireplace and grabbed a burning log and pulled it out, and he smashed it across the detective's face and head. He instantly went up in flames. Jerry lugged the remaining alcohol on the ground. The bottle shattered, and the contents abruptly turned into a little fireball. The detective's skin bubbled and burned as he stepped toward and tried to grab Jerry by the throat. I jumped in and charged as fast as I could. but the Burning Man was too fast. His free hand grabbed me by the shoulder and squeezed me with a machine-like death grip, tight enough to dig his fingers through the cloth and skin, through the muscle and tendon, only stopping when he hit bone. I couldn't even scream before he pulled me into the air and flung me like a rag doll against the wall. "Fuck!" I shouted, grabbing my shoulder. Didn't hurt anymore, but the pain with the memory hadn't faded. Everyone was screaming and yelling over one another in their spots around the dinner table. "What just happened?" I asked. "Dude!" Jerry grabbed me into a bear hug. "I thought you were dead." "Oh shit, my teeth are back too. I can finally say fuck again. Double win." Evidently, all the chaos had settled down, and we were able to take turn explaining how we all died. Evidently, I was the first one to go this time around. The detective killed Jerry and Tobias pretty soon after. Wolfgang and his mother made a run for it, but a pack of 8-legged squirrels tore them to shreds before they could make it to the end of the driveway. Lauren, Claire, and Bridget made an honest attempt to solve the mystery, but Jerry's fire got so out of control that half the manor burned down before the rain could put it out. They sought shelter in the kitchen, but the doors locked behind them and the room began to fill with water. Nathaniel instructed them to solve a puzzle before the time ran out. The 3 of them drowned an hour later. Honestly, it seems like I got off pretty easy. The sound of a loud chime echoed throughout the house. "What the hell was that?" Jerry asked. Nathaniel answered with a smile. "Ah, goody. It seems the detective has finally arrived. Perhaps he can help us sort out this ghastly affair." We didn't attack the detective this time. We didn't need to, because this time, we didn't even open the door. Tobias and Jerry muscled the barricade with furniture against the entrance. Then, we tied Nathaniel up and rolled him in a rug burrito. We shoved him into the parlor. It was probably unnecessary, but we turned off all the lights behind us for good measure. Next, we all gathered in the dining room to take stock of our situation. "Where are we on weapons?" Tobias asked, pulling out his gun and removing the magazine. "Why am I out of bullets?" I threw Wolfgang a dirty look and decided it wasn't my time or place for this particular battle. "We used them earlier," I answered. "So ammo is expendable. That's inconsistent." Lauren pulled out a blade hidden beneath her glove. "This is back. I think we already established it does fuck all against these guys, though." "Tobias," Bridget grabbed her husband's arm and pulled her face near his. "What are these things? Tell us what we're up against." The way she asked made him think that he was expecting him to know the answer. He didn't say anything. He was hiding something, perhaps maybe even something important. But before I could call him out, Claire let out a painful scream and fell to the ground. Lauren dropped down next to her, trying to figure out what was wrong. Everyone else was talking now. Everybody was distracted. Everybody, except for me. Because I could feel what she was feeling. I already knew what she knew. I recognized this buzzing energy in my stomach. Somebody was about to die. I looked at Wolfgang just in time to see him plunge the kitchen knife into his mother's throat. She fell in stages. First, putting both hands on the table. Reality hadn't quite sunk in for her yet. She tried to speak, but blood poured from the wound. Her face turned ghost white, and then her legs gave away. I reached her side just in time to catch her. I went to my knees and I held her in my lap. She looked at me with fear in her eyes. The hilt of her knife moved in tune with her weakening pulse and the torrents of blood erupting down her dress. Wolfgang already escaped out of the room. Hope grabbed my arm and tried to form some words, but choked on her own blood. She didn't have long left. Before I knew it, Bridget was next to me, pushing a fabric of her own dress over the wound in some futile attempt to stop the bleeding. Hope recoiled in pain and dug her nails into my arm. She was crying. Not just from physical pain, but from the emotional torment, the humiliation, the worst fear realized. Whatever Claire had done to me, it was in overdrive now. My mind was wide open, and Hope wouldn't stop screaming into it. She tried so hard to be a good mother. She wrestled with demons for years. She built a wall around the truth because Because that was the only way she could survive. Her perfect Wolfgang, her precious angel, was sick. It wasn't his fault. There was nothing she could do to make him better. So, she did the next best thing. She protected him. She hid the evidence, the graphic drawings, the animal bodies, the truth. What other choice was there? She didn't truly understand what choice was until this moment, where all choice was really taken away. It was almost a relief. There was a kindness in failure. Death was a mercy. Now she didn't have to pretend. She had done her best, and finally, she was allowed to rest. She's suffering, Lauren said to us. Why don't we just... it's not like it matters. We'll see her again when the whole thing repeats. Hope's eyes grew wide as a surge of terror went through my body like electricity. The last thing she heard before her consciousness left her, the final lingering thought in this poor woman's mind, was the obscene reality. She wasn't free from anything. She was still a prisoner. The idea was just too much to bear. I almost screamed for her. But the instant she died, it severed the connection, and I came up gasping for breath. There was no sadness left in me, only pity and anger, as I wiped tears from my face and said, "Someone help me find that kid so I can fucking kill him." "Not worth it," Tobias said, as he helped his wife to her feet. "Why not?" I asked. If we're just going to keep dying and repeating this pattern over and over, what's the point of saving time anyway? "I have a theory about that," Tobias said. "We all remember dying, right? But we also remember other things, impossible things. Remove the impossibility, and what's left? No matter how improbable, it must be the truth." "Okay," I said. "What's left?" Our memories are fake. See, memory isn't some ethereal concept like a soul. No, it's a physical manifestation, a chemical process caused by amino acid chains within our brains. Find a way to alter that process and you can convince someone that they've experienced something that they didn't. Or you can make them believe something didn't happen when it did. Lauren picked up on his thread and ran with it. "You're implying that somebody got us all together here and implanted the last few days? That we've been tricked into thinking we can't leave and we can't die? Why?" He leaned against the table and put his hand to his chin. And he stared at the floor for a long, uncomfortable moment before responding. "It might get worse than that. What if we're all victims of implanted memories? The damage could go way beyond just short term, like the last few days. Not a single memory before now can be trusted." He slowly looked around the room, pausing to give each of us a second of eye contact. Then he asked, "Do any of you have memories before today that would objectively be considered impossible? Anything that doesn't make sense based on our collective understanding of the universe?" I looked at Claire. She was already looking at me. I heard the words in her head without seeing her lips move. "Don't tell him about me." "Why not?" I thought. "Because," she answered, "he would kill and dissect me if he had the chance." "No," I lied. "Nothing comes to mind to my immediate recollection." Lauren added, "Nothing out of the ordinary for us either." "Samesies," Jerry echoed. "I'm just a boring old Instagram model with 6 million followers." "Well," I said quickly, hoping to end this conversation before he wised up. "What's the plan then?" Tobias crossed his arms. "The most important thing we can do is contact the outside world. I can build a crude signal booster for our cell phones, but I'll need some equipment. We'd probably find everything we needed in the kitchen, but according to our memories, the kitchen is booby-trapped." "Okay, so what do?" I repeated. "We go to the kitchen," he answered with a smile. "If my theory is correct, that memory was just a device to keep us out of an off-limits area. If my theory is wrong, we'll know right away when the room starts filling up with water. You'll never believe it, but it turns out his theory, it was wrong. On the bright side, he was the only one to drown this time. We tried blocking the door open with a couple of chairs before he went in on his own, but the door automatically slammed shut. It sliced through the damn furniture like a guillotine through hot butter. We stayed on the safe side of the kitchen door. trying to communicate with a series of bangs. He and Jerry were both fluent in Morse code for some reason, but it didn't get us anywhere. An hour later, the banging stopped. We tried to give Bridget a chance to mourn, but we had already wasted so much time. As soon as she seemed up to answering, Lauren began. "Bridget, I gotta ask you a few things." She was sitting in a chair by the fire, shaking, staring dead ahead. Clearly traumatized, but functioning and communicative enough. I always knew something like this would happen. "What does that mean?" Lauren asked. Jerry handed Bridget a glass of alcohol. She took it in a gulp and then said, "It's Lisa. I knew they would get him eventually." "Who's Lisa?" I asked. "You mean you really don't know? I thought maybe that's what this all was. Maybe you're all from the Institute or were just testing us, seeing if we'd break and give away their secrets." That's a big missing piece of the puzzle finally clicking into place. Lisa wasn't a who. It was a what. Lisa. L-I-S-A. The acronym for some shadowy organization that Tobias apparently worked for. I knew he wasn't some lowly business consultant working with a knowledge of bomb schematics and Morse code. Bridget took another drink. "He's been with them since before we even started dating. But I knew something was wrong. He talked in his sleep. He left papers out. He left emails open. I don't know the full extent, but I know enough to understand what my husband really did for a living." Her eyes were all red and puffy. Tears were welling up and weakening the dam. "Tobias was a good man, but he worked for some very powerful people. That's all I know, I swear." Claire took the spot right next to Lauren, right in front of Bridget, leaned down beside her and said, "Liar." Bridget looked at her in shock and said, "What?" "You're a liar." Bridget shook her head. No, it's true, all of it. I loved him. She dropped the glass and put the hands against her eyes. She began sobbing uncontrollably. But then, the sobs changed. They morphed into something else. Something that almost sounded like laughter. And then she took her hands away to reveal a huge grin on her face. "Oh my God!" she exclaimed. "Do you have any idea how long I had been holding that in? Another round of delirious laughter later. Jesus Christ, I deserve an Oscar for that performance." I couldn't believe the transformation. I couldn't believe I ever felt sorry for her. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded. Bridget pointed at Claire. "Why don't you ask the psychic? She ought to know." Lauren pulled her sister back and stood in between her and Bridget. "Oh, don't act like it's some big secret," Bridget mocked. "You couldn't have made it any more obvious. That's the one thing about secrets. Sooner or later, they all come out." "And what's your secret?" I asked. She sized me up, then stood and squared off against me. Suddenly, I felt very weak, very exposed. I knew this woman standing before me could kill me 10 different ways if she wanted to. "Show me yours and I'll show you mine," she said. Claire exclaimed, "She's a spy." Bridget sounded almost proud. "It's a little more complicated than that, but yes, I think you have the gist of it. Tobias was my assignment. He very well may be the smartest person alive, but like most men, he has one weakness that's very easy to exploit." "And Lisa?" I asked. "The Liskoff Institute for Societal Achievement, a global think tank specializing in application of the paranormal. For lack of a better word, this has something to do with it. As soon as the old crone died, Tobias called his handlers to let them know what was happening. He's far too important for them to leave in the middle of some small-town murder investigation. They should have sent a rescue team here within the hour, but they didn't. The only explanation I could think of is that they're the ones running things. Maybe it's a ploy to vet me or to get a confession. If that's the case, I don't care anymore." She held her middle finger to the sky and shouted, "You hear that, you arrogant fucks? I don't care anymore. You win. I just want off this ride." She continued to spiral. A thought occurred to me. I was right. Tobias had called for backup when we were locked in our rooms. But that was before the first reset. Could a phone call, like our injuries, have been undone? I have an idea, I said. Bridget fell back into her seat. Well, that makes you the one in charge, doesn't it? This might be the stupidest plan I've ever come up with, I said, but I think it needs to be tested at least. I'm in, Jerry exclaimed. I didn't even tell you what the plan was. You had me at stupidest plan I'd ever come up with, I sighed. Well, what is it? Lauren asked. I think we need to try the landline again. Maybe we'll get lucky and we can call for help. Knock yourself out, Bridget said, but I'm staying right here until this is all over. I've died enough times tonight. Now I just want to get drunk and sleep. Great, I thought. We're splitting the party again. What could possibly go wrong? We left Lauren and Claire to keep an eye on Bridget and to shout down the stairs in case they saw Wolfgang or the detective. When we got to the basement, I held my breath in anticipation of the door slamming shut behind us. When no obvious traps were engaged, I beelined for the phone, took it off the cradle, checked it for bombs or needles, and then put it to my ear. Amazingly, there was a dial tone. So far, so good. I nodded to Jerry and gave the thumbs up. Next, I dialed the number to my town sheriff's station from memory. Ragged so many times I almost gave up hope. But then somebody finally answered. Hallelujah. Sheriff's Department, she said with a cheerful voice and a southern accent. I didn't recognize her. She must have been new. How can I help you today? Hi, I need to talk to the sheriff right away. It's urgent. Is everything all right, hun? No, not in the least. Put me through to the sheriff. I'd love to, but he's not available right now. It's the middle of the night, you know. But if you have a message, I'll be sure you'll get it as soon as he comes in. I took a look at Jerry and shook my head no. Jerry made a jerk-off motion. I'm not really sure what that was supposed to mean. Fuck you, I said into the phone. Excuse me? You went through all the effort to trap us in this building and this house and convince us that we're all going crazy and you couldn't even do basic research? What kind of Mickey Mouse bullshit conspiracy job are you running here? If this is some kind of joke, I'm not amused. I'll have you know that it's a crime to call... The sheriff isn't a guy, dipshit. Her name's O'Brien. The woman on the other line didn't say anything for a long time. When she finally spoke again, the accent was gone, along with the cheer. What's wrong with you, Jack? Why can't you just be normal and play the fucking game? It's not that hard. I'll even make it easy for you. Since you're down a couple of people, just work together and find the attic key before Coda finds you. It's simple, right? Who the fuck's Coda? The line went dead at the same time Jerry asked, Hey Jack, wasn't there a stuffed polar bear down here earlier? Guys, thank you so much for listening. I'm so sorry it took so long to get this next part out. I, as you know, have been very, very busy, but hopefully, probably, we'll be able to get these out in a little more timely manner. Bedside Manor, timely manner, you get it. I want to thank all the patrons. I want to thank everybody who likes and shares and does all that. And if you have any suggestions for stories that you'd like to hear, leave it in a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, do all that stuff YouTube likes. And I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.